Hello everyone, welcome to CVRC. Our discussion for today is about fingerprint patterns. So let's start. But before we going to discuss the 8 standard patterns, let's first take up the type lines. Type lines are the two innermost ridges which start parallel, diverge, and surround the pattern area or tend to surround the pattern area. In these two examples, the loop pattern, and the whirl, we can see that the type lines surround in the loop area. It called two inner. This is the most important, no? Because these two innermost ridges at the divergent of each ridges, at the divergent portion of the ridges, we can locate the delta. So these ridges that surround the pattern area are the one that will identify the part of the pattern area. For the whirl pattern, basically because it has two delta, so there are two sets of type lines, the left side and the right side. So again, it surrounds also the pattern area. These type lines are not connected to each other. Most most of the time, they are broken lines. But it doesn't mean that they cannot consider as type line. They are type lines in the sense that they will create the area where you can identify the pattern area. In the other side, or the enclosed part of the type lines is the pattern area. Specifically, it refers to the part of the loop or the whirl in which appears the core, deltas, and the ridges with which we are concerned in classifying. It, it identifying the pattern area that only the loop and the whirl. Actually, in art pattern, plain art and tinted art, and most of the time, they don't have type lines. And of course, if there is no presence of type line, there is also no pattern area. Let's proceed. These are the portion of the type lines. You can identify it as whirl because the ridges, the formation of ridges is creating a spiral inside the pattern area, inside the type line. There are three classification, sometimes called category, sometimes called family, or other called it general fingerprint patterns. We have the arches, we have the loops, and the whirl. For their frequency, arches is the lowest. It means that out of 100 persons being subject for fingerprint, only 5 of them have arches pattern. And the largest frequency of the pattern is the loop, which have 65%. If we're going to name all of them, we have 8 standard fingerprint pattern. Correction, 8 standard. According to Johannes Evangelist Portingi, he identified in his research, during his research, that there are 9 fingerprint standards. As of now, the International Association for Identification, they established that there are only 8 standard fingerprint patterns. These are the plain art, the tinted for the arches family, the radial loop, and the ulnar loop. And for the whirl, of course, the four, the plain whirl, central pocket, double loop, and accidental. So let's start with the plain art. Plain art with a symbol of capital letter A or small letter A. It has no delta and no core. Capital letter A is applied only to index finger, while the small letter A can apply to any of the finger that's include the thumb, the middle, the ring, and the little finger. If you notice in this part here, you can determine that the flowing of ridges from one side to opposite side only create waves, or they are creating weaving only. It has no any other formation. And in the fingerprint, this weaving is not called a pattern or a design. No, this is not identified as pattern. That's why it's called plain art. A pattern in which the ridges entered on one side of the pattern then flow toward the other side. For The other types of arches is the tented. Tented is called tent because it formed like a tent. Tented with a symbol of capital letter T for the index again, or small letter t, containing either delta or core or both, a type of the pattern. Tented, called tented because it creates a tent. They create like a triangle, creating a tent, where majority of the ridges forms an arc and one or more ridges at the center shape like a tent, tented arc. For our identification, we have three types of tinted art. Angular tinted art, let's create an angle instead of uh, art. There is an angle in one of the side, particularly the upper side, up thrust, one or two ridges rising at the center, or the looping type. This looping type tinted art is a quite unique pattern because this pattern is a loop. It's a loop formation. However, it lacks of two or more requisites to become a loop. That's why it classified as tinted art. Let's proceed to the loop. Loop have a delta and a core. It have a sufficient recurving. If you notice, the loop have a delta and core. One delta and one core. Sufficient recurving. This sufficient recurving, it means the ridges that enter from one side or that ridge enter in one side, at least one, recurve and exit in the same side where it started. It doesn't mean that they are connected, but the end portion of the threads exit in one side. And of course, at least one reads count. If you notice in the example, one reads count. When we talk about reads counting, we don't include the delta and core, only the intervening that passes or cut by our imaginary line, the blue line there. Let's proceed to another slide. The types of loop, we have radial and ulnar. Take note with this, especially this loop always come out in the board exam. Radial loop, the downwards looping, take note with the word downwards looping, downward. So it means from up to down, sloping or slanting toward the direction of the thumb. Again, thumb, it called radial from the word regius, a bones of our forearms that support, that give the main support of our upper limb or our hands. A downward sloping toward the thumb. For the ulnar, it called ulnar coming from the word ulna bones, one support bones of the regius that is in the side of the little finger. That's why it defined as the downward sloping. Again, take note, downward sloping or slanting toward the little finger. Take note with this, toward the little finger. For the word family, we have four word family. The plain word with a symbol of W or small letter W for little for the other finger, only the capital W for index finger, the central pocket loop, the C or small letter C, the double loop, capital or small capital D or small letter D, and the accidental with the symbol of X. All of them have a minimum requirements to become a loop. It should have two deltas, left side and right side delta. If again, this is called, or this they are classified as a word family because of the word two deltas or more for the accidental. The accidental is the only that have two or more. Let's proceed to the plain word. The plain word is consists of one or more ridges make a complete circuit with two deltas, between which, when imaginary line is drawn, at least one recurving ridge within the inner pattern are cut or touch. These are quite confusing for most of the student, the plain art and plain word. Although it's easy to identify it if we have an image, but take note in the board exam, there is no image anymore. It's always word. So take note with their hint, their clue. So again, plain word is called a word. It's part of the word because it has two delta, the one side and the left side. If you notice, their type lines go from left and right type lines. The center of it is the delta. And if we put an imaginary line from this delta, if we put an imaginary line, there is or there are or at least one recurving ridges. Okay, notice no here recurving ridges that being touched by the imaginary line. Whereas when we talk about central pocket loop, the, they are almost the same in definition. However, two deltas the same, no? And obstruction. Let's talk about obstruction. Here, obstruction in this part of the delta. And one things they're different is when an imaginary line is drawn from one delta to another delta, there is no recurving ridges that being touched. Actually, if we're going to interpret this central pocket loop literally, we can identify easily central pocket loop at the center of the loop because this is a loop formation. In general appearance, it's like a loop. However, at the center of the loop, there is a creating whirl. There is a pattern of whirl. That whirl that create give us the definition of obstruction. And when we put the imaginary line, there is no recurving ridges. Take note, no recurving ridges for the central pocket loop. For the plane word, at least one only. And both of them have two deltas. For the double loop, it called double loops. In the old book, it called twin loops, but they're the same. But today, it's named as double loop. For the double loop, they are classified as double loop because it has two separate loop formation. Take note with this two separate loop formation. These two separate loop formation have a set of shoulders, have their different set of shoulder, separate formation. They are not connected. The end of the first loop and the second loop are not connected. They are not also interlocking because if if the end of the formation of the recurving or the looping ridge are connected to each other or they are interlocking, they cannot be classified as double loop. It should that the double loop have separate and set of shoulder. Next is the accidental. Accidental is a quite unique pattern. Accidental is called accidental because there are two types of pattern. We can combine different patterns and become accidental in one pattern area. In an enclosed type lines in one pattern area, two different patterns, except, don't forget, the exemption, the plain art. When this plain art pair with another type of pattern, it will not constitute accidental. It will remain the pattern of his pair. For example, plain art plus central pocket loop, it remains central pocket loop, and so on to the different combination. But when the two patterns pair in one pattern area and it's not a plain art, then we can identify it as an accidental. Again, accidental is the only pattern that have more than two deltas. Actually, it has two or more. Basically, two or more. That's why it's classified as um, a word. If you look at in the illustration, the extreme left side have a delta, and another extreme right side have also a delta, have a present of delta. And again, there's another formation of the pattern. These two loops in the pattern area, please uh, follow my direction, follow my illustration, with the two loops creating actually the double loop. However, if you notice, the end of these ridges are connected to each other, therefore it cannot be classified as double loop. And if this is not classified as double loop, it only classified as plain whirl according to the rule. And another one, you can also create another loop formation. Three loops na siya. So it means that three loops, more than two loops, because in the classification of pattern, we have only double loop, two loops. In here, in this example, we have three loops. That's why this pattern is classified or identified as accidental. And that's all, folks. These are the easiest way to identify the fingerprints, the 8 fingerprint standard. See you next time.